content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you. What's good, everybody? I'm GG. I don't know if at the current moment you got any issues with what I'm saying, if the stream is skipping or hopping or jumping around. I don't know, man. Anyway, man, what's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Late night, god dog it. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up with no chasers. And, I want to give a shout out to all the members of the Green Gorilla channel. You know who you are, man. Papa Didas, Roderick Jackson, Scott Haywood, Black Words 404, Black Uhuru Strikes, Dr. Thunder, Dr. Tree 33, Rais Muajid, Leroy Honeycutt, Show Me the Thinker, Broken Blade, Javon Thompson, Life of Commerce, Super Tech, Waffle Weave, Kisses from Afar, 77 Base X, Brian McMurray, Apex Prowler, K-Ron S, Anthony Davis, BGS Ivmore, Professor Carl Tone Jones, Artisan MC, Damon Brown, Donnell 360, Herbert Lewis, Seven Coast Dojo, Rogus Son, Pulpit 28, Charles Rogers, B. Hillfire, Rick Ross, Sandra Jean, Brotherly Love, Charles Gilmore, Patricia Colley, 7Q Pick, Kwaku Asasi, Gregory Oliver, Greg, Barry Little, Alan Wiley, Mr. Valentino, Jason Hales, Black Men Being Brutally Honest, Omni Americana, Cameron 87, Deshaun Nolly, Nelso, Kareem Not Karen, Dr. Rock, J. Charles, Mark Hotley, Ways, Jeffrey Speed, The Face, Mark Swift, I Collar, Donna Watts, HipHop.CATV, Coach DC, Kashif Caldwell, Nichita, Mr. Blue Collar, Barnolis, I'm Just Jules, TD Hip Hop Media, Drew Main, Mr. Heat, Sir Anthony, MLR, Universal 178, Rashid Barnes, Aaron Smith, DH, C-Truth the Revelator, Gold Professor, Aaron Infinite, Dr. Tiasan Johnson, Kalandra Collar, Ricky Dawson, Cedric Bowman, 27360, BK Born Shaheed, James Washington, Hostile ADEP, W. Para 1, Marvin Battle Jr., and Forrest Windu. And on my Patreon side, Kevin Watchbank Owens, William Joyner, Tyrone Hampton, Jules Winfield, Excalibur, Jason Warren, Pursuer Prisoner Taz, Dragon 59, Supreme Ibmore, Adrian Hicks, Jay Bailey, Mr. Michi Momal, and the Sangwa. Big up to y'all, man. Appreciate you for all the help and the support, man. Straight up. But let me get right into what I want to do today, man. Cut that music short. I told you that, I told, BGS specifically that I was going to do a video to try to explain what feminists think about Rousseau and to give you, Rousseau's opinion about women and feminism himself. Because there was a lot of feminist, authors that sprang up during the Enlightenment, male and female. And, Rousseau has some things to say about it. And, basically I'm going to read an article to you. And, it's an academic article. And that's why I'm doing this late, because some people might find it interesting, some people might not. I didn't know if I was going to do it until tomorrow, but I decided to do it tonight. I'm like, okay, well, whatever. Let me go ahead and do this and get it over with. And people who actually, care about the information, they'll stick around, during the late times to, receive info. So, people who are really here for the info, as opposed to the, sensationalism and the emotionalism related to, specific demographics of black folks. So anyway, man, let me get right to this, man. So this is an article, man, and I pulled it up on JSTOR, and let me pull it up on my screen. All right, the article is called Rousseau and Modern Feminism. And the article was written by a young lady, Linda, forget her first name, but let me see, let me make sure this, okay, yeah, Linda Lange is her name, Linda Lange. And the article was written in 1981. But I mean, this is a good article, to be perfectly honest. You know, to gain insight into these ideas and these concepts, okay? But we've already gone over what Hobbes thinks about the state of nature, what Locke thinks about the state of nature, what Rousseau thinks about the state of nature, what each of them to some degree think about property and the pursuit of human beings and the justification for the state, what job the state is supposed to be, performing in behalf of citizens who give up some of their freedom. Like, what is the state supposed to be doing for these people? Okay, and anyway, I thought it was just a good article, okay, to explore these issues, right? So this is a woman writing it, right? It's a female, right? So anyway, she says, and it's a long article. I might not read the entirety of it, but hey, if you got time, I got time. So anyway, she says, Jean-Jacques Rousseau has often been charged with inconsistency, despite his own assertion that all of his writing is informed by the same principles. Recently, however, there's been a different sort of charge of inconsistency. It is claimed that his spirited opposition to sexual equality is grossly inconsistent with his defense of equality for all citizens. So, I mean, look, if you don't know, like Rousseau has some opinions about women, you know, that today would be considered to be absolutely regressive, okay, to a certain extent. But I mean, when you that's by today's standards, though, not the standards at which he's writing, okay? I mean, of the day of which he's writing, okay? But even in that regard, if you catch the gist of what he's saying, and you'll see that covered here in this article, you'll see it. I see you, Doc. I see you, Doc Tia-san. But anyway, man, you'll see it. So anyway, on the other hand, Alan Bloom, he's a renowned scholar, philosopher, right, who writes secondary literature about philosophers or whatever. Anyway, on the other hand, Alan Bloom, who claims to detect consistency in his approach to women and men, finds him a state of contemporary anti-feminism. Now, we can look at the footnotes to this, but, you know, and it might prove useful to do that. So let me go all the way to the footnote section of this. It's going to take me to hit these buttons to get there. You just go there, man. I'm hitting this button, man, which is file, but I got it. Maybe if I hit the bottom button, it won't. Let me shrink this so I don't keep getting the same BS. I want to go to the very last page. Won't let me do it. It's taking me. There we go. I just want to see the footnotes, because a lot of times people read articles and they'll skip over the footnotes, and a lot is lost there. Anyway, yeah, okay, so the first footnote is not of anything to worry about. Anyway, the major work on this subject is Susan Moeller Oken. Then they got something by Alan Bloom, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Emile, or On Education. But what's really important here is this one thing, this footnote number 4. We haven't even gotten to it yet. But let me go back. So let me go back to the beginning of the article before I lose your attention. But as long as we can get to it. Okay, anyway, I assume you can see this, right? So let me make it bigger again. All right. Anyway, she says, I propose to present an interpretation of Rousseau's theory of women's nature and their unique contribution to civil society, which is different from both of these perspectives. So you have the anti-feminism approach, which is what Alan Bloom says that Rousseau is. And then on the other hand, you have a group of people who say that his view of sexual equality is inconsistent with his other views about, you know, citizenship and how everybody's free and equal in the state of nature. So anyway, this woman is going to come along and say the following. I propose to present an interpretation on Rousseau's theory of women's nature and their unique contribution to civil society, which is different from both of these perspectives. In my view, and this is a woman talking, Rousseau is basically consistent in his treatment of men and women, despite a few discrepancies. Writing as a feminist. Now, this woman is a feminist. Okay? I believe his views can be studied to advantage by feminists. Rousseau addresses almost every issue that contemporary feminism is concerned with. Now, notice, this is a feminist author basically saying that Rousseau, for the most part, now the article was published in 81, but still, he addresses almost every issue that contemporary feminism is concerned with. And he does this in a manner which proves on examination to be surprisingly relevant to present problems, whether one agrees with his precise conclusions or not. With regard to sexual equality, it is possible to turn Rousseau on his head in a manner of speaking. Okay? The theory of women's nature and their role in society, which I shall present, has been developed on the basis of ideas and insights found in many works of Rousseau. The years 1756 to 1759, immediately following the writing of the first and second discourses, saw Rousseau's production of a large body of work devoted a great extent to the relations of sexes and the nature and role of women. His major work on the subject is found in Julie à la Nouvelle Héloïse, which is just known as Julie for the most part, right? And Letter to Monsieur d'Alembert sur les spectacles, okay? And another work is, or you can call it the Letter to Mr. d'Alembert, okay? And the other one is Emile, okay? And Emile ou l'éducation, which is, you know, on the education of Emile, right? All written during this period. So she's alluding to other works where you can find out what, you know, Rousseau's opinion on education is. And of course, Emile is a man, okay? It sounds like a woman, but in French, that would be a man, all right? So Emile is his discourse on how people, you know, should be educated from toddlers on up to young adulthood and, you know, even to adulthood, younger, you know, as you get more mature. What should your education consist in? And he thinks that men and women should receive different kinds of education. All right? Now, anyway, book 5 of Emile was written before the other books of that work, immediately after the letter to Mr. d'Alembert. Prior to this period, some footnotes to the second discourse, as well as the history of the origin of the family in that work, showed that this subject had been of earlier interest to Rousseau as well. Anyway, she goes on to say the theory I shall present is very much more systematic than the one encountered in the works of Rousseau. This systemization of the welter of observations and recommendations concerning the sexes, which is found in Rousseau, has the effect of making apparent some features of his views that otherwise easily escape notice. They may even have escaped the notice of Rousseau himself, which I think is bullshit. Rousseau, like, come on, man, don't argue that you know things about the man and his work that he doesn't know himself. That's bullshit. Anyway, they may even have escaped the notice of Rousseau himself. I shall argue, however, that he was constantly faithful to his fundamental principles, and that as a result, there is an underlying consistency in all he writes. And I agree with that statement there, though. I don't agree with the one that there are things that he's saying that escape even himself, but I agree with, you know, that he is consistent. Anyway, in order to understand what Rousseau's intentions were in prescribing a particular social role for women, some background is required concerning his analysis of social relations in general. And this is important shit right here. Thank you, 3000 TT. Because you got to understand what Rousseau thinks about society in general. Now, I read certain segments of Rousseau to you, right, from the social contract. And basically, he thinks that people are born free, but everywhere they are in chains. And he thinks that society is responsible for saddling human beings, people, with artificial obligations. And it creates a constellation of problems that do not exist in nature. A whole bunch of dysfunctions that are artificial with the development of civil society, okay? And we'll look at what he says about that, okay? Anyway, Rousseau was a severe critic of what he regularly referred to as la société civile, civil society. It is my view that civil society, as Rousseau pictures it, has the main features of capitalism or possessive market society, as it is modeled by C.B. McPherson. Now, this is important, so I am going to go back to that footnote that I left earlier. This is what I really wanted to capture, right? But I got to go to that footnote. So it might take me some time to get there, but I got to get to this footnote. So you can see what the features are of a society of this kind. The one that, Rousseau has a problem with and that he takes pause with. Okay? So what are the features, according to, McPherson, of a possessive market society? Okay, so there is no authoritative allocation of work, meaning nobody's making you work a specific kind of job, okay? There is no authoritative provision of rewards for work, meaning that companies can pay you, on various scales. There's no uniform payment that you receive, okay? There is authoritative definition and enforcement of contracts. So it's a society in which people have to honor their contracts, and the state will punish you if you don't adhere to the terms of the oaths you take, okay? Also, all individuals in possessive market society seek rationally to maximize their utilities, meaning you want to win. Whatever your desires are, you want to basically maximize your happiness and, do as much as you can to attain felicity, okay? Letter E, each individual's capacity for labor is his own property and is alienable. So your property, your labor is your property, but you can alienate it for a wage. You can basically take on the task of working for someone else and be remunerated for it, okay? Land and resources are owned by individuals and are alienable, meaning they can be bought and sold, okay? Some individuals want a higher level of utilities or power than they have. Lastly, some individuals have more energy, skill, or possessions than others. And, in the end, she has something to say about this in the footnote. C.B. McPherson, The Political Theory of Possessive Individualism. The presence of these features in a society sets into motion the price-making mechanism of the market, which, in response to supply and effective demand, sets a monetary value on everything. Human powers and skills, natural and acquired, no less than land and commodities. In a derivative sense, the individual, him or herself, becomes a commodity. Now that's important. And it might not seem like it's important, but it is important because this is a way of life that is relatively new. You only begin to see this way of life arising after the Enlightenment. Or, right around the time during the Enlightenment. Because prior to that time, you had feudalism, which was an entirely different set of social and economic conditions which obtained in Europe. There was no individual's capacity for his own property. Individual's capacity for labor is his own property. No, your labor is the king's property. You peasant, you peon, you go out there and you work for me and you do what the king needs done and pay your taxes. Right? Land is not alienable. The land belongs to the Lord. So, this is a relatively new social schema, a social economic schema, which gives rise to a different set of ways that human beings think about themselves and what's rational and irrational, right? But ultimately, the criticism of this view, of this new way of life is that it takes everything and reduces it to lucre, to money. Everything is about money. What you create is about money. What market value does it have? Your human powers and skills, can they make money? And the extent to which whatever skill you have doesn't make money, it means that you have less value as a human being. And one can find this problematic, okay? So let me go back to where I was, okay? But that's an important footnote. So Rousseau is going to have some issues with this. I went a shot too far. Yes, okay, so Rousseau was a severe critic of what he regularly referred to as civil society. And she goes on to say, and I'm just repeating it so we know where we were, it is my view that civil society, as Rousseau pictures it, has the main features of capitalism or possessive market society. Just as McPherson demonstrated that the work of Hobbes, Locke, and others had the effect of justifying the crucial features of possessive market society by showing that their assumptions and conclusions conform to that model of society, and not by showing that they had a concept of possessive market society. I believe that the object of Rousseau's criticism conforms to that model. So basically, Rousseau is critical of a model of society that is of the market possessive kind. Okay? But not that he actually perceived the emergence of capitalism out of feudalism. And I don't want to go into that, basically, Rousseau is critical of free market capitalism and the negative features and externalities that come along with it. Okay? Now, that's whether you like it or not, but just understand that this new way of thinking about the world and labor and resources and property is not something that's deterministic. It's something that grew out of a particular historical condition in Europe. It's a culturally particular thing, a phenomenon. It's not something that's theoretically just, self-evident. Although there are many who would try to make that the case. I don't believe in taking things that are culturally particular and extrapolating from that their universality just based upon their acceptance. That's just not how I operate. Okay, but anyway, the view of Rousseau's criticisms are applicable to a certain form of civil society and not civil society per se. So, civil society in and of itself is not bad, but the possessive market society is not, really very redeeming in his viewpoint. Okay? Anyway, this bridges the gap between the vitriolic criticism of civil society in the early discourses and the ideal of a good and legitimate society presented later in Du Contrat Social, which is the social contract, okay? Or the social compact. Now, I'll have you know, I read a portion of the social contract to you. But in this work, ultimately, what Rousseau is trying to articulate is the idea that the people are the sovereign, and that what is legitimate is the legitimate will of the people, not an accumulation of desires and goals that individuals have on their own accord. You know, like, okay, everybody registers their opinion about what's best for them. We tally it all up, and then you have the general will of the public. That's not how he perceives the general will of the public and how the public is able to express his will. Ultimately, what he tries to argue is that you have to look beyond your own individual interest and to perceive what is best for the society as a whole. And you vote in that way. You consider the public good, not just your private good. But what Rousseau is going to have an issue with is the possessive market society, where individuals don't have the capacity any longer to think about what's in the public good. That's why I showed you the video the other day about about the endocrine disrupting chemicals. Endocrine disrupting chemicals are a byproduct of the chemical industry and the marketing and manufacturing industry. Well, the manufacturing industry is what I meant to say. And the way to, create products efficiently and productively so that you can make a profit, off of what it is that you're producing, right? The outcome on nature and even the endocrine system is like an afterthought. And that's the issue with this form of a way of thinking. People think about what's best now, what's efficient now, what's good now, and then they think about the negative externalities later. It's time to clean it all up later on. I showed you another video about, the technological mode of being related to Heidegger and how you can get caught into this mode of thinking. And you can think that that's all that there is. The only way of thinking about the world that exists is the one that we currently are in. But it's the job of the philosopher to say, okay, well, look, let's pull back from what we're thinking and the way that we perceive reality and see what it is that we're actually doing. What are we doing here? And what impact is it having beyond what we're cognizant of at the present moment? Like, what are the implications down the line for our current practices and our current ways of thinking and doing things? That's at the heart, right? Or should be at the heart of what a philosopher is doing. But anyway, so Rousseau has some problems. Okay? Anyway, all of the evils of modern civil society, according to Rousseau, are derived ultimately from the fact that personal or particular interest, l'intérêt personnel or l'intérêt particulier, is the dominant rationale for action. Meaning what's best for me, motherfucker. What's good for me. Fuck the group. Fuck the society. Fuck the community. What's best for me, God damn it. Fuck y'all niggas. Fuck y'all. What's good for me? What's in it for me? What is worse, according to Rousseau, is that society is structured in such a way as to make this appear transparently reasonable. For Rousseau, the incompatibility of this with our authentic interests and its deeply corrupting effect on our moral character only appear after a thorough study of nature and history. So in other words, these artificial interests, and they are artificial. Look, society is an artifice to a certain extent. Yeah, human beings do, we agglomerate in nature. We form social bonds in nature. This is true. But the kind of culture that we have now, we have created. We constructed this with the obligations, the rules, the schemes of who wins, who succeeds, who fails. This is all a fabrication. It is like the Matrix. It's an artifice. It's not literally real, but we make it to be real. We make it to have a great deal of import. That's the truth. Okay? And I dare anybody to argue otherwise. I'm waiting for someone to step up and to tell me I'm wrong about that. Okay? Anyway, Rousseau thought that the idea that the sexes might both operate on these principles and that women should not be denied the right to advance their particular interests as men do was one of the most absurd and lamentable consequences of this modern philosophy. Now check them out now. So you already got men absorbed into this lifestyle, this way of thinking about reality and how to interact with other men in the context of it, which he already thinks is corruptive. But then he says, not only are you having men do this, now you're going to add women into the mix? What a fucking disaster is what he's saying. And Ray knows, I'm going to make it plain. I don't know how to make it no more plainer than what I just said. So first of all, you already got men engaging in behavior which Rousseau thinks is corruptive, corrosive, artificial, in a negative way. It's in a way that places men in chains and prevents them from being able to achieve their authentic interests. Okay? But he's saying, okay, now you're going to add women into this mix. Now women want to be involved in the same corruptive, corrosive practices as men related to civil society. Now you got something even worse. Now you got something even fucking worse, okay? You're opening up a Pandora's box here, is what he's saying, okay? It's one of the most absurd and lamentable consequences of this modern philosophy, in the words of Linda Lange, okay? Or Lydia Lange. I can't remember what her name is, but okay. And this is a good article to me, okay? It is in this area that I find his views insightful and potentially instructive. It has been a theme of feminist criticism that the opposition of interest, exploitation, competition, and so on, claim to be endemic to our social and economic system are, in some sense, male values. Now notice, I even hear this sort of language in the manosphere. I mean, I hear it repeatedly that, competing, going out there, exploiting and working and grinding and getting, dirty, getting it out of the mud, trying to get money. That's a male activity, right? So anyway, feminists come in and they say, well, this is not just something that's endemic to males, okay? Doesn't just have to be male. That's what the feminists are saying. Like, we want some shit too. We want to compete too. We want our interests, our particular interests, to be registered too. Our subjective interests to be tallied up too. Anyway, Rousseau's work provides arguments in favor of my view that the basic philosophical principles which underlie these values, which have shown themselves in many transformations in the history of political thought since Hobbes, are perfectly compatible with the lack of social discrimination between the sexes. And I agree with this. Look, a woman can be just as competitive, just as self-interested, just as hedonistic and individualistic as any man can. I believe that. But the problem is that all of this is covered under the veneer that women are carrying, that they're emotional, that, they have an ethics of nurturance. And they don't really have it in them to do all this other stuff. I personally believe that's just cap. Okay? But that's just my opinion. Then she goes on to say, it is another question, however, whether these principles are ultimately useful to democratic feminism. And as far as I'm concerned, this is all feminism is at this point. All feminism is at this point is my ability to participate in the market like men. All the extra bullshit is just extra bullshit. I want money. I want to be able to get money like men. I want my particular interest to be registered like men. I want my psychological, egoistic ways to be registered like men. Which, of course, at the end of the day, Rousseau is going to say, look, if you want to have a free and a just society and a culture, you can't just be thinking about yourself all the fucking time. Now, thinking about yourself some of the time is necessary. Okay? Not to say that it's not. It is necessary. Having a love for yourself is necessary. But having and hanging on to only what's best for you, that's not necessarily a love for yourself. That's just outright selfishness. It's the difference between loving yourself and just being, avarice, subjecting others to avarice obsessively. But, I digress. Anyway, Rousseau's analysis of social relations in the first and second discourses is largely a response to a theory employing the concept of a social contract. A type of theory, and I've already, told you what the social contract is. She's just recapping it here in her own words. A type of theory which enjoyed a heyday in the 18th century and now appears to be enjoying another one. And when she's saying this, there are theories coming out like John Rawls's theory, a theory of justice, which I read for you, or outlined for you already. And there are other people who come and respond to John Rawls and his theory of justice. Go back and look at the videos, look, and you'll see Rawls there. It's another form of contractarianism. A new form of, how to develop political and moral principles under, the rubric of a convention, a contract. Anyway, so Rousseau's analysis of social relations in the first and second discourses is largely a response to a theory employing the concept of a social contract, a type of theory which enjoyed a heyday in the 18th century and now appears to be enjoying another one. According to Rousseau, the innate drive for self-preservation, amour de soi, does not in itself suggest any necessary opposition of interest. So, okay. I'm going to let her explain that. Writing very largely in opposition to Hobbes, Rousseau argues that this drive is non-predatory. So loving yourself doesn't mean that I'm looking for a way to exploit, to compete, or to make a profit from others. In the state of nature, that is. In a natural relationship. Okay? Devoid of this possessive market value schema, right? So a love for yourself, amour de soi, does not in itself suggest any necessary opposition of interest. The drive is non-predatory under circumstances where there is only occasional scarcity. And above all, it's non-comparative. That's important, man, this word non-comparative. Because when you listen to what women are saying, they're just basically saying everything in comparison to some fucking imaginary group that they've created, namely men. Like all men are making the same amount of bread and have the same amount of power. Which I find to be absolutely absurd. It's fucking ridiculous when you sit back and you think about it, right? But this is what they've done. And it's all about, what am I getting in comparison to you monetarily? or honorifically. This is what this is about. Okay, so anyway, so long as his needs are met, what does the natural man care if others are yet better off? Lacking as he does any notion of status or honor, or even the imagination to covet luxuries. Okay, now this is important. So he's talking about what do men find pleasing, or what is in the interest of a man in his natural state. Okay? As long as he's got enough food and water, he's got a place to sleep, relatively safe, who gives a fuck what the other guy has? Like, I don't care about it, man. I got enough for me to be cool. I'm good. Now, this is a natural man, right? Like, almost like a fucking Rastafari or something. Not worried about, like, my clothes look better than his? Is my car, like, do I have, like, bigger rims than he does? Does my car, like, have doors that open like Batman's car versus the doors that open the regular way? Nobody gives a fuck about that in the natural state, is what he's saying. Does my shirt have a Fendi symbol on it? Does my purse have like little Louis Vuitton letters covering it? In a natural state, that's frivolous bullshit. But in civil society, it becomes of paramount importance. And the question is, what makes it so important? I was seeing some videos today that other content creators were showing. One of them, was, Kendra G's on a show, and you had some women, with like kids, they went out for fucking Halloween or whatever the case may be. I'm talking about the Crimson Cure, and they got they dressed up like money with the dollar sign near the poom poom, and the dude is the ATM machine. Like, this is what it's all come down to. Like, and for Rousseau, this is ridiculous. This is a sad state of affairs. But now you put women in on this, it becomes even worse. The problem becomes amplified, according to Rousseau. Okay. Anyway, it is civil society which gives him these ideas. The natural man. According to Rousseau, the gradual development of interdependence and entrenched inequality of power and wealth transform the expression of the drive for self-preservation, which is amour de soi, into l'intérêt particulier, my particular interest, right? And then, the paragraph goes on. The individual, from a state of benign indifference to others, develops a self-conscious, vain concern for relative position within social relations. Since all develop these same concerns, their interests are necessarily in constant opposition. Let me read that again. The individual, from a state of benign indifference, like, I don't care, man, you got this, you got that, so what, bro, I'm good, becomes then a self-conscious, vain concern for how do I compare with where others are. It becomes let me keep up with the Jones effect. All artificial. So then you start to wonder where you fit in and how you rank with others. Right? And then he says, since all develop these same concerns, their interests are necessarily in constant opposition. So if you're always worried about how you look in relation to me, then all of a sudden we got an issue. Now we're in competition or in opposition with one another over some frivolous bullshit. It's some bullshit. And you see this now being played out in the context of sexual, intimate relationships where women are like, if he ain't making as much as I am and he ain't got as much, social capital as I got or money that I have, then he is not of value to me. And Rousseau is like, this is the epitome of bullshit. But even when men do it, it's bullshit. You hear rappers talk about like how my car is sicker, my rims are wider, my ice look wetter and all this bullshit. Rousseau is like, it's bullshit. Okay? Trying to show you're better than somebody else through material opulence or flashiness. And the funny thing is the people who have the least have the most invested in trying to appear as if they have more than what they have so that they can save face and appear to be, on this so-called status, whatever the fuck the status is, whatever, okay? Anyway, all this does is create opposition, one person in opposition to another. For the natural man, according to Rousseau, the only impulse which gives him any interest at all in the interest of others is a spontaneous impulse to compassion for his like, which is pity, an impulse which he shares with the higher mammals. But pity is stifled by the opposition of interest in civil society because its gentle voice, pity, suggests actions which are imprudent, hence irrational, to the individual caught within the social relations of possessive market society. God damn. Other words, human beings really don't have that much interest in what the fuck is going on with other people in the state of nature, except for this natural pity that they have or compassion that they have for people just like themselves. Even mammals have this. Now, this is just Rousseau's, rendition of what the state of nature is like. According to Hobbes, it's different. But this is Rousseau. Anyway, but he says pity is stifled, or pity, compassion, empathy. It is stifled by the opposition of the interest in civil society because the gentle voice of pity or empathy or compassion suggests actions which don't work in the context of civil society. It's irrational to pull over and to help your neighbor out or to make sure he's okay if he's in a distress. Because this is all about me and mine, and I got mine, you got to get yours. And, you got to work hard, bro. Like, if you don't have enough, probably because you didn't work hard enough. That kind of thing. Okay? And unfortunately, in the context of male to female relations, you have women entering into the market, competing with men, and then requiring of men that men be able to provide resources traditionally for women, which is absolutely fucking absurd. Now, not only do you have to compete with them for the resources in the market, namely jobs, now you still have to make more than they do after they set into course procedures related to justice so that they can perform at your level, meaning get as much money as you. They force themselves into the market, but still demand that you be able to do things for them in a way that is traditionally done between men and women. This is why Rousseau said this is just fucking ridiculous, okay? It's ridiculous. But let me take a break real quick, man. Let me get rid of some of this noise in the background, and I'll come back with the rest of this. Hold on. I'll be back in 1 second. I swear I will. Let me hit you with a quick commercial one time. Support the channel, man. All right, my bad for that bang. It shouldn't have came in with a bang, but go out with a bang. Why not come in with one? But anyway, back to what we're doing, man. We left off talking about the features of, a possessive market society and how Rousseau thinks that they're deleterious to man's natural instincts. Yeah, men have love for themselves and they want to preserve themselves. But like when you start talking about the layers of attitudes and sentiments that are artificial, that are brought about from, or that come from, the kind of cultures that we live in, then you get all kinds of enemy and dysfunction and pathology, okay? Anyway, according to Rousseau, the civilized man, and look, he's not the first person to articulate ideas like this. I remember reading Plato's Republic. I can't remember which book it's in, but Plato basically tells Glaucon and Adeimantus and a whole bunch of people who were having an argument about justice that it's more difficult for me to explain what justice is in something tiny than it is in something large. So let's explore what justice is in the context of a city. And then after that, we might be able to better understand what it looks like inside of an individual. So they go about creating the Republic, ergo Plato's Republic. But the first thing they do is, while they make a republic, they create a healthy one. A healthy city. But nobody likes it. They hate it because all of the comforts and the accoutrements, of effete, civilized society, they don't exist in that state. This ideal city that they create. They're like, okay, we don't just want food that will sustain and nurture us. We want cakes and shit, pastries and pies. And, we don't just want, what's going to preserve our lives. We want funnel cakes and fucking Kool-Aid and shit like that. I mean, of course they don't have, but the equivalent of what they desire is like what I'm saying. We don't want oats and, rabbit, with little to no seasoning, and we don't want just what'll sustain us. We want the sweet shit. So anyway, he says, well, according to Rousseau, or this woman says, according to Rousseau, the civilized man has been morally corrupted on the deepest possible level. This form of social consciousness, or moral character, as Rousseau would have it, is amor propre, usually translated into English rather misleadingly as vanity, but it is amor pro or propre. I'll just say propre just to pronounce it in English so you can get it. Rousseau's criticism of social relations, taken together with his criticism of social contract theory, suggests that what a contemporary philosopher would call rational or psychological egoism is not a given concerning human nature, but rather it is a social artifact, which is a combination of particular interest in possessive market society and amor propre, which develops as a response to those social relations. The dynamic of the marketplace, I suggest, is the objective or material basis for all of this. And one of the things that I'm very aware of, man, like I know that's a lot to take in, okay? But ultimately what it is this. The kind of egoism that human beings have currently and the way that they think about themselves and others and whether they keep people at either an arm's distance or they embrace them and, how they perceive people as either being a benefit or a liability to them, right, is all related to a particular interest that stems from or emanates from a possessive market society and this idea of, loving myself in comparison to others, how I fare within the context of it. The free market is the cause of all of this. And a particular way of thinking about reality and social and economic relations is the cause of this. So anyway, and this is Rousseau, okay? So, this woman goes on to say, justificatory political theory based on rational egoism has nothing to say about the ultimate correctness or goodness of desires or goals. And that is true. That is absolutely true. A lot of people talk about what's rational or irrational. Look, it doesn't matter what your goal is, what your end is, what consequences that you're seeking to obtain. What matters is whether or not you are using efficient and non-contradictory means by which to attain that end or that goal. That's what rationality consists in. I can tell you that's a fact related to this way of thinking. You don't reason about ends and whether they're rational. That doesn't matter. What matters is you have a fixed end, a fixed goal in your mind, and it's all subjective. It's all unique for every individual. That's why you sit and you talk to people, you ask them, well, what do you want? What is your goal? What are your goals? What do you want to be? Nothing is irrational about their goals or their desires. The only thing that's irrational is whether or not they're actually doing what's requisite to obtaining those ends. Now, I don't think that that's true. I mean, I think, I'm an Aristotelian. I think you should deliberate about ends and first principles. You should reassess and reevaluate goals and be critical of other people's goals to determine whether or not they're the right kind of goals and values to begin with. That's just my personal opinion. But hey, you can't tell people what to do in this culture. Not anymore. I mean, it's gotten to the point where, man, look, you can do anything. I want to be a dog tomorrow. Fuck it. Go ahead, dog. I want to be a pony tomorrow. You can't tell anybody anything about their goals or their desires. It's gotten to that point where anything is on the table. Anyway, for example, consider from the point of view of rational egoism. Desires and goals arising out of a more propre or just more desires and goals. The political effect of this approach from an historical point of view has been contradictory. McPherson demonstrated why the theory of Hobbes and Locke can be and has been interpreted to lend moral support to market or capitalist relations and hence to grave inequality. But at the same time, theory based on rational egoism has also served the term of a form of egalitarianism. For if the social contract is thought to be based ultimately on the rational self-interest of the individual, subjectively determined, upon what basis could women, or any group for that matter, be denied access to all avenues available for the legitimate pursuit of their individual interest in a given society without their being freed thereby from any obligation to fulfill the terms of the contract? In other words, the statements of social contract theory, especially from the position of Hobbes and Locke, are clear. If the contract does not work to your benefit and help you to attain your goals such that it enables you to be able to pursue what you consider to be the protection of your life, the enhancement of your liberty, and the protection of your property, there's no need for you to be a part of the social contract. No reason to enter into it, and you can dissolve it and not abide by the laws because the laws are not legitimately working in your behalf. So here it is. Okay, so you got, why would women agree to a contract in which they aren't able to achieve their personal, subjectively determined goals, and interests, just like men. Why not? I mean, this is what the literature says, right? I mean, everybody should be able to pursue their own interests and their own goals and determine their own life plans and to do whatever they want. And you can't tell anybody that whatever goal it is they have is fucked up or that is abhorrent or that is misdirected, misplaced in terms of being wise. It's all about doing what the fuck you want to do. So how can you then in turn tell women you can't do what the fuck you want to do? Hey, lady, I'm doing my show right now. I'm gonna hit you back in a minute. Okay. I'll holler at you tomorrow. Peace. So anyway, sorry for that disruption. But I mean, look, the argument here is, okay, like if men can do what is in their best interest and if they aren't able to do it in the context of the social contract, then the contract for the most part is null and void. So this is an entry point, a means by which women are actually able to liberate themselves or at least have the same kind of equality that men do in the context of these kind of social schemes laid out by contractarian thinkers. I didn't make this up. I'm just giving you information, okay? Anyway, the most typical answer to this question has been the denial that women have in full measure the qualities by virtue of which male individuals must be accorded whatever rights and duties they are accorded in a given theory. And this is a feminist writing. I have to admit, this is true. So what men do is they say, and I had a kid on my show tell me that women can't do what men can do. Again and again and again and again, or like women are emotional, men are logical. Or that, men don't have the same kind of hangups that women do. But lo and behold, you have a woman here who has been able to put down her ideas logically, consistently, expressively, in a way that many men in the black community can't do because the motherfuckers can't even read. Now, we can talk about the background conditions of why that's the case, or whatever the case may be, socially, historically, economically, situationally, or whatever the case may be. But to argue that the lady doesn't have the capacity to engage in logical syllogism or rational concatenation is ridiculous. She does. You are seeing that she has the power to do so. But you got guys who'll come up and say, well, women just aren't as logical as us guys. And it may be true that, on the spectrum, women are not as driven as some men are, or don't have as high levels of intelligence as men do. But that's because they fall into the mean in terms of intelligence, where men are on the different poles. You got extreme idiots in male and, masculine IQ levels. Then you got like geniuses. So like men are all over the place in this regard. But I mean, all I'm trying to do is to demonstrate that, hey, it's traditionally been said that like women aren't given the same rights as men because they don't have the same kind of capacities intellectually. So John Locke, for example, argues that marriage is, or may be, a form of contract based on consent. But why would a rational, self-interested individual consent to a contract of inequality, giving the other party all the power to control and dispose of their mutual property? According to Lorraine Clark, This is accounted for by Locke's assumption that the man is naturally superior in body and mind, and that reproduction is a natural disadvantage for women, which compels them to further their self-interest by seeking dependency on men. However, Locke's view is a shaky foundation on which to base male ascendancy, if only because of the stipulation that self-interest must be subjectively determined. If women take the view, as many have, that their self-interest is not in fact served by these marital arrangements, what reply can be made to them that is consistent with these basic principles? Namely, that if you enter into a contract, the contract, if it's a rational contract that you're entering into, it has to be into your self-interest, right? Because that's the way you think in a market. It's always boiling down to what's best for you. Not what's best for the whole unit, what's best for you. That's why you enter into a contract, you always think about, well, what are the ways I can be screwed? Like, what causes, work to my disadvantage? Like, how can I increase my value for myself in the context of this contract? That's a free market thinking mechanism that people use as they engage in barter related to the kind of conventions and contracts they come up with. Anyway, it says, she goes on to say, it may be noted that few, if any, of the major political thinkers have ventured to deny the rationality of women completely. Now, Aristotle said that like women were deformed males. That's what Aristotle said, okay? But Plato, basically thought that women, for the most part, have the same natures as men. Can be courageous, can be honest, can be loyal. And then you have some men that are cowards. You have some women that are cowards. You have some women that are loyal. You have some men that are loyal. You have some men that are disloyal. And vice versa. So, in Plato's eyes, what you need to do is you need to breed the people with the best virtues, both male and female together, so that you can have the best offspring. But that's a whole nother conversation. But the idea being put here is that, like, if you're just looking for virtue in one demographic and just, assert that only the good quality is applied to men, you're missing something. That's what Plato would say. And that's what many women say. Okay? Whatever. So it may be noted that few, if any, of the major political thinkers have ventured to deny the rationality of women completely. What they have done, as a rule, is to distinguish between types of rationality, reserving the highest type for male, in order to account for the undeniable fact that, even from their own presumably biased perspective, women have always reasoned and act on principles suspiciously similar to their own. After all, we are members of the same species. What other interests can you have? What other sentiments and emotions can you have? There's only so many of them. Anger, gratitude, hatred, fear. When you talk to them, you do understand what they're saying, right? It's not like we as a species can see each other and not have the capacity to even interrelate at all. Like, I can't even understand you at all. You can even understand animals if they're in pain, or if they're angry, or if there's a problem. But I digress, man. Anyway, faced with the rejoinder suggested above, individualist theory had either to go farther in insisting on the natural inequality of the sexes in rationality, thus leaving it even more suspect from an empirical point of view or had to concede the point. As far as the history of individualist theory is concerned, the theoretical point appears to have been conceded. So this whole business of are women rational or are they not in philosophical circles, now maybe in public parlance, this issue is still raging on and people are making these claims or whatever the case may be. But amongst the most, smart motherfuckers in the Enlightenment, the point was conceded that women have the same intellectual capacities and the powers of ratiocination as do men. Social and political thought was full of explanations of and justifications for the inferior social position of women. Prior to the time of J.S. Mill, who is John Stuart Mill, a utilitarian philosopher, who wrote on liberty amongst, this other book, The Subjection of Women. But anyway, Mill appears to have silenced the Lockean type of approach forever, apparently leaving non-Marxist political theory virtually speechless concerning the nature and social role of women. This occurred at the same time as sexual inequality continued to be entrenched in most legal, social, and economic institutions. Okay? So this is a feminist speaking now. Now let me keep pushing now. However, the subjective determination of self-interest, meaning you make up your own, I make up what I feel is best for me. Like the necessarily comparative nature of individual worth and self-esteem, which Rousseau argues are a consequence of it, is a doctrine impossible, at least in principle, to limit in scope of application. Now that's a lot being said there. Once the idea is formed that an individual has the right to determine and pursue his or her own self-interest, it gradually becomes impossible to deny this pursuit to anyone in a manner that is consistent with the fundamental principles of this school of thought. So if you say that you're free to do, and this is the issue that I have with negative liberty, but it's a part of the social contract tradition, especially as presented by John Locke. You ain't the boss of me. You can't tell me what to do. I am the best person to determine what's best for me in the long run and the short run. And if it is the case that these are the principles upon which economics are to be worked out and politics are to be worked out, then how can you deny it to every member of society, including women? Or, people who you consider to be members of races or other gender-based groups that you feel are subordinate, at least formally or legally. Anyway, she goes on to say, it seems to me, therefore, that individualist theory, which takes rational or psychological egoism as a starting point, has a tendency to equalize all persons with respect to everything except economic class, and has therefore been serviceable to liberal feminism. And that's important. This is the biggest, you don't think there's a lot that's being said right there, but this is a whole lot of shit being said right here. A whole lot. Let me read that again. It seems to me, and Lydia Lange, that individualist theory, which takes rational or psychological egoism as a starting point, has a tendency to equalize everybody with respect to everything except class, an economic class at that, and has therefore been serviceable to liberal feminism. I call it, I don't want to be ignorant by saying this, but if I had to be like bitches who want money, bitches in pursuit of the bag. You get it? This ain't about changing the basic structure of society, making everything free and equitable for everyone and all this fake shit. This is about me being able to get my share of the pie in a system that one can argue like this is anti-revolutionary. It has nothing to do with redressing historical grievances, none of this shit. From disadvantaged groups, none of this. Although they consider themselves to be a disadvantaged group on account that, they were restricted from being able to own property and such, even though there are records which demonstrate that many women own property, were left dowries and all kind of shit by their deceased husbands. I don't even want to get into that because, history is more nuanced than the way it's all, related to us and articulated to us with these cut and dry, black and white, good, bad, Manichaean, dualistic, narratives. But anyway, the status of the sexes had become an issue in pre-revolutionary France. And it is frequently apparent that Rousseau's views on women are a response to feminist arguments. These arguments are invariably ones that are still being fielded today. A fact which supports my view that Rousseau was reacting critically to a social and economic system that in broad outline is still with us. Rousseau was a severe critic of these arguments in a manner which was consistent with his general criticism of individualist thought. Behind this is his perception that the underlying theme of these feminist arguments was for the most part the individualist principle of subjectively determined self-interest. And that's what it is. I agree with this. 100% I agree with this. It's not about what's good for the collective, what's good for the group, what's good for the community. It's about them buying in wholeheartedly to the current economic system and still not being able to get much, if anything, out of it. So everything stops in relation to actually trying to acquire a system that is more equitable in relation to distribution. That's just no longer a concern. Or even trying to redress old, imperialistic sins and to repair for those. No longer, none of that's a concern anymore. The only thing that they're concerned about is their own individualistic desires and hedonistic aims and goals. That's it. I want to be able to do what the fuck y'all doing. Which Rousseau is like, even what they are doing is fucked up. Like what men are doing, especially white men in the culture, he's like, this is a sick and depraved concept of politics and society. This is not how we ought to be acting. This is a corrupt society. Anyway, behind this is his perception that underlying most of these feminist arguments was, for the most part, the individualist principle of subjectively determined self-interest. Fuck you, it's all about me. Just watch the videos. Like, all you got to do is watch these videos. You'll hear women, all they're talking about is me. What's best for me, nigga? What's good for me? What's in it for me? What can you do for me? Ask not what I can do for you, but ask, what can you do for me? If you ask them the question, well, what can you do for a man? What do you bring to the table? I am the table. And Rousseau has got a deep-seated problem with this shit here, bro. Because basically what he's going to end up saying is women are manipulators. We'll see how in a second. Anyway, she says, I shall present Rousseau's views, beginning with his arguments from nature concerning the difference between the sexes. Following this, his view of the moral corruption based on the concept of amor propre, which threatens as soon as women forsake their feminine role, will be discussed. The crucial role in a good society of sexually differentiated social virtues based upon nature will be presented next. Following this, the argument for Rousseau's consistency in his treatment of the natures of the sexes and human nature in general will be concluded. Finally, the insights this may offer contemporary feminism will be presented. So all I read was the introduction to this goddamn article. But I'm going to go into it a little more, but I'll resume this tomorrow if you're so interested. If you are interested, put a 1 in the chat and I will read the rest of it, from where I leave off tonight. If not, leave a 0 and I'm done with this shit. If you're interested in seeing what, Rousseau has to say, I'm going to continue to go. So anyway, this is the second section of her paper, okay? So anyway, she says in book 5 of Emile, and it's a book about education, all right? That's what Emile is about. Rousseau states the following essential difference between the moral potential of men and women. So these are Rousseau's words right here. Let me take a hit. Right, quickity. Anyway, this is what Rousseau says. The supreme being wanted to do honor to the human species in everything, while giving man inclinations without limit. He gives him at the same time the law which regulates them, in order that he may be free and in command of himself. While abandoning man to immoderate passions, he joins reason to these passions in order to govern them. While abandoning woman to unlimited desires, he joins modesty to these desires in order to constrain them. Okay? So men have immoderate passions and he connects reason to them in order to temper them, to constrain them, to govern them. Now, this is Rousseau speaking, right? But women have unlimited desires, and to them, God has joined modesty in order to constrain the desires. So men have immoderate passions, and he has reason to govern them, while women have unlimited desires, and he joins modesty with them so that they can be governed as well, okay? The functions of these virtues, it may be noted, have a difference that corresponds to the difference in their character. Man controls or governs his own behavior with the use of reason. The woman merely restrains hers. Now, this is a feminist talking. I don't know how far off in that you want to read. It is what it is, okay? But the man is able to control his passions through reason, whereas the woman is only able to restrain hers. But I mean, if restraining ain't fucking controlling, I don't know what the fuck is. But hey, have you ever restrained a motherfucker and not been in control over him? I mean, hey, bro, this is what, you can nitpick shit sometimes to the point where it's ridiculous to me, but I don't know anybody who's ever restrained anyone who hasn't been in control over what the fuck they're restraining. But that's just my opinion. Anyway, while the man under the sway of amor propre may be thought to display his human potential for rationality in a corrupted form, the woman so swayed is sharply deflected from her unique human virtue of modesty. How has Rousseau concluded that there are such great differences between the sexes? It is done, surprisingly enough, in a manner which appears on analysis to be determinately empiricist. Contrary to expectation, Rousseau does not rely on custom, prejudice, or God's will in the course of his attempt to justify a unique and inferior feminine role for women. In the discourse on the origin and foundations of inequality, which is what that le origine et les fondements de l'inégalité is, on the origin of the foundations of inequality, like the discourse on inequality might be what some people call it. Rousseau presents a sort of philosophical anthropology concerning, among other things, the origin of the family and the different social roles of the sexes. Rousseau's model of the state of nature in this discourse is unique among models of that state, not least because it is not assumed to be populated by families. Male and female wander individually, provide for their own needs, and meet by chance, having no practical reason to stay together and no notion of particular attachments or love. On love, Rousseau writes, obviously from the male perspective, she's got to throw that shit in. This sentiment, founded on certain notions of merit or beauty that a savage is not capable of having, and on comparisons he is not capable of making, must be almost null for him. Any woman is good for him. Damn, Rousseau, you ain't got no standards, huh? He said, man will fuck anything that move. Man will smash anything. I mean, this is Rousseau's words now. This love thing, founded on certain notions of merit or beauty that a savage is not capable of having, and on comparisons he's not capable of making, don't exist. They're null for him. Any woman is good for him. And I mean, but to some degree, this may be true. Like, what are all these standards of beauty about? Where do they come about? About how she looks and how is she beautiful relative to who? But I'm digressing here, man. Anyway, in a footnote to the second discourse, Rousseau discusses one of Locke's arguments for the naturalness of the male-headed family. Locke argues that the female is not able to provide for her young on her own, and that her father is bound to take care of those he hath begot. According to Locke, since the woman commonly gives birth to another child long before the last one is independent, the man therefore remains in conjugal society with the same woman for a long time. On this, Rousseau first remarks that moral proofs do not have great force in matters of physics, and then argues that continuous pregnancy is more like a result of cohabitation than a cause of it. At which I agree with that. I just have to say, I agree with Rousseau more than Locke on this. You stay around with a woman long enough, you keep smashing her, you're going to have kids with her. You're hitting the raw if you're doing the ODB. But hey, in the first state of nature, men and women have no idea of the consequences of sexual interaction. And therefore, it is not a matter of explaining why they will stay together after delivery, but why they will stay together after conception. Because how do you know when a woman conceives? She don't even know most of the time. When we're talking about the state of nature, which I think, is a counterfactual, I personally do not agree with social contract theory at all. I think it's a bunch of bullshit. That's just my opinion, though. But, I mean, it's useful insofar as men, it's interesting. You can see how men, because what these contracts about the state of nature are, they're really actually expositions about what man's nature actually is. That's why I find it interesting. It's these ideas about what nature is like is really actually, offhand or, an indirect way of explaining, well, what are men like? What's the nature of man or mankind? Anyway, Rousseau's attempt in Emile to discover the most basic laws of nature regarding the difference between the sexes follows the same method he uses in the second discourse. But, however, this putatively scientific approach seems to him to justify the immediate inference of a principle with vast consequences. It is one which is only too familiar to the contemporary reader, but by no means evidently true. The man should be strong and active. The woman should be weak and passive. That's Rousseau right there, baby. Rousseau said the man should be strong and active. The woman should be weak and passive. Oh, man, I can see the women right now, man. Bad as a motherfucker. They looking like this. That's how they looking at Rousseau right now. But I'm just like, I'm laughing like a motherfucker though. Oh, man. Anyway, the different biological contributions of the sexes to their common aim of reproduction dictates this principle according to Rousseau. And to some, look, I don't want to get too graphic, but look, let's keep it 100 here, man. Women can be sexually aggressive or whatever the case may be, but we're talking about like typically, we're talking about tops and bottoms here, bro. We're talking about tops and bottoms, man. Who's typically on bottom and who's typically on top? I'm not trying to be ignorant by saying this, bro. I'm just keeping it 100, bro. Who's usually laying on their back doing the sex act, man? But I digress. Equal strength and self-assertion are inconsistent with the reproductive biology of each sex. This argument concerns Homo sapiens in the pure state of nature prior to the development of any specifically human culture or society. As such, it presages the spirit of the type of evolutionary arguments which came later. In other words, this is like evolutionary theory before Charles Darwin gets to it. Anyway, from a biological point of view, for procreation to occur, Rousseau writes, one must necessarily will and be able, it suffices, that the other put up little resistance. Which, oh my God, that sounds fucked up, bro. But I mean, it's true to a certain extent. In another direct response to feminist debate, he argues that it is scarcely natural that men and women should enter with equal boldness on a course of action which has such very different consequences for each of them. And I do think that that's true. if you know that having a kid is going to, be the product of sex. This is why I know for a fact, like, man, today I was, watching a video of some woman who's a non-select woman. She's always arguing about how to, pretty privilege. I think that's the chick that came up with the term pretty privilege, some bullshit like that. And then there were a whole bunch of women, talking about like, men complaining about single mothers. And then they seem to argue that like, it's like, well, men are the ones responsible for single motherhood because they leaving the women with the kids by themselves, which is these women have to know this is some bullshit. They have to know it's some bullshit. Because you basically don't want to be told what to do by a man. That's the reason you're single. You don't even want to have to move beyond interest la particulière. You have amour propre. You don't want to actually cooperate and think beyond your own vanity, your own self-interest. That's what's going on here. And the culture we live in supports and endorses this point of view. But anyway, moving beyond that. And I agree with this feminist here on this point though, right? This response presumes that the woman in the state of nature knows what the consequences of doing the get down, the horizontal tango, what it actually is going to, result in. But he already said that they don't know what the result's going to be. So how can he, then double back and then say, well, the consequences are different for men and women. Well, how do we know? So I agree with her on this point. That's just an inconsistency in Rousseau, all right? But anyway, this response, however, presumes that the woman in the state of nature knows the consequences of sexual interaction for herself, which is at least debatable given what Rousseau says about the total inability of Homo sapiens to formulate ideas or project expectations in the pure state of nature. Is sheer physical domination of women by men then natural? No. In the pure state of nature, men are not very aggressive about anything, including sex. And natural compassion, pity, is undiminished. We may suppose that a rebuff or flight or even a display of fear on the part of a woman would probably be sufficient to discourage an unwanted partner in the pure state of nature. Most importantly, honor is not at stake. So, like, a lot of this is deep, though. Now check this out now. Basically, Rousseau is saying, man, in the state of nature, men are not really all that much, like, tripping off women and sex. They are to some extent. If they try, they get rebuffed. Okay, cool. If the woman's acting like she really doesn't want it, okay, fine, bye. And honor has nothing to do with it. Contemporarily, men feel like being rejected is a blow against their amour propre, their self-conception, which, Rousseau says in a natural state, men don't even give a fuck about. It only matters in relation to, civil society and the opinion that other men have about men who are incels and shit like that. The incel argument doesn't come up in nature. Which, I don't necessarily agree with, but, whatever. Most importantly, honor is not at stake. According to Rousseau, the violence and incessant competition commonly attributed to male sexuality or a result of the knowledge and pride of amour propre developed in social relations. They are not natural. Now, there are several reasons why I don't agree with this, because even in nature, you're going to find males fighting over access to females. So I don't buy this. I'm just telling you, I don't buy it. Okay? But good shot, Rousseau. But I'm not really buying that part, okay? Rousseau believes that female sexual timidity is among the natural qualities, which, if uncorrupted by society, will prevent mere appetite from overwhelming the specifically human potential of sexual relations and actually prevent domination of women by men. Let me read that again. Rousseau believes that female sexual timidity is among the natural qualities which, if it's not corrupted by society, will prevent mere appetite from overwhelming the specifically human potential of sexual relations and actually prevent domination of women by men. But if women are educated in society to be like men, he claims, women will, of course, aggressively pursue their own desires. And men will have no reason to defer to timidity. So, he writes, decide to raise them like men. The men will gladly consent to it. The more women want to resemble them, the less women will govern them. And then men will truly be the masters. Which, of course, men don't have the capacity to do. Okay, I just don't believe men have it in them to do it. Because if women are really actually coming to resemble men, then we should treat them like men. But men don't want to treat women like men. Anyway, this rather chilling observation is thought-provoking if one considers the lasciviousness with which the idea of women's liberation is frequently greeted by men, and the disconcerting ease with which talk of feminism has recently become fashionably acceptable in circles which are still, in fact, effectively dominated by men. The timidity and weakness of the woman, according to Rousseau, inspire her to be pleasing to a man out of basic impulse of self-preservation. It is thought that this behavior simultaneously makes him more inclined to remain with her. According to Rousseau, these are the means she is given to supplement her weakness by making him serve her. Look at this again. These are the means she is given to supplement her weakness by making him serve her. To act to please men is therefore a quality of women directly derivable from nature. Rousseau writes, if woman is made to please and to be subjugated, she ought to make herself agreeable to man instead of arousing him. Her own violence is in her charms. From this, there arises attack and defense, the audacity of one sex and the timidity of the other, and finally the modesty and the shame with which nature armed the weak in order to enslave the strong. There's a lot of shit being said here. And really, we would have to read more Rousseau on this in total and not just, look at her truncated view of it. But I just presented this article to you so that you can gain some understanding of some of the things that Rousseau is actually saying and what a feminist says or might say in response to it. However, if the man is stronger and dependent on the woman only through desire, as Rousseau claims, whereas she depends on him through desire and need, why should he bother to please her and refrain from simply exercising his will? Rousseau has provided two answers to this question in Emile, which is his treatise on education. These answers concern beings developed well beyond the state of nature. This is appropriate, of course, if the issue of sexual violence only arises with the development of amor propria. And here, look, this is foreshadowing here of where this woman is going to go with it. But look, it just seems to me like women who are feminists universally argue that women are just consistently subjected to men's violence, unprovoked. It's almost as if, they're passive in a way that they argue that they're not, or that they should not be. So on the one hand, I mean, this is the shit that fucks me up. It just seems to me like they want equality only as it pertains to distributive justice. They don't want equality as it pertains to retributive justice, but only insofar as they're able to exact retribution. If any retribution is to come down the pike and rain down on their heads, they want to sidestep that and make excuses because they don't want to be accountable. Yeah, men are stronger, but it doesn't mean that, we already know this, man. People who are weaker than other people attack people all the time. Sometimes they get their asses whipped. Sometimes they're able to use weapons or tools in order to overcome the person that's stronger than them. But sometimes they might even be more skilled in fighting. And win a battle or a competition against somebody stronger than them. That's what jujitsu is all about. Or judo is all about. But anyway, Lee Haney was one of the strongest men in the world. But if he went in the boxing ring with Mike Tyson in his heyday, he probably would have got his ass whipped. But that's just my opinion. Anyway, what's the next stage? The first argument is that real violence in sexual relations is contrary to its own ends, since it is a declaration of war, which may result in death, whereas the end of sexual relations is the perpetuation of the species. I mean, that makes sense to me, though. If violence in sexual relations is contrary to its own ends, then why even engage in it, But, human beings are contradictory and assholes anyway, right? This is clearly a restraint which must be based on a fairly sophisticated rationality. It is indeed reason, as we have noted, that is thought to restrain masculine sexuality, according to Rousseau. And it is noteworthy that it is not the mode of rational egoism which is said to be the restraint in question. The end of sexual relations is here defined as a collective end of the species, rather than in terms of individual self-interest. If the goal of the man were simply gratification of an impulse, real violence may not always defeat its own ends. The other argument is related to the ultimately conventional character of paternity. It is that a child would have no father if any man might usurp a father's rights. This is meant to be a consideration that a man might use to govern his own behavior, and is once again a collective or social rather than a purely individual motive. This brings us back to the question of the naturalness of the male-headed biological family and the issue of certainty of paternity. Now, this is some shit only a woman would write. I can guarantee you that. I can guarantee you that, bro. Because put it this way, let's say, for example, you're a man and a woman, and you exist with, a group of others, men and women, and primarily men are the ones who are going to do the heavy lifting in terms of defense in a hunter-gatherer society of some kind. Okay? And yeah, you might have a village wife here and there. You might hold the children in common to some degree. But, come on, man. People are possessive, especially when it comes to relationships with, significant others and shit. You know how many motherfuckers been killed and, harmed over, infidelity in the context of sexual relations? This ain't no brand new shit. And women have the same impulses in this regard as women. As men. Women have the same impulses. Women will fucking kill you, destroy your property, try to ruin everything you've ever built if they find you fucking with another chick, man. Let's keep it 100, bro. Let's just be real. Let's just be real about this shit, man. I'm just being honest now. And men will do the same shit. Anyway, as we have seen, the male-dominated family is not a purely natural phenomenon for Rousseau, inasmuch he does not suppose it to be present in the pure state of nature. In the speculative history of the second discourse, women are depicted in the state of nature as able to provide for themselves and their dependent children. It is a momentous development for humanity when increasing population drives some to less balmy climates where they are motivated to learn to build permanent shelters. Rousseau writes, "The habit of living together gave rise to the sweetest sentiments known to men, conjugal love and paternal love. Each family became a little society, all the better united because reciprocal affection and freedom were its only bonds. And it was then that the first difference was established in the way of life of the two sexes, which until this time had had but one. Women became more sedentary and grew accustomed to tend to the hut and the children, while the men went to seek their common subsistence. Though able to meet her own needs when solitary, the woman is assumed to be weaker than the man, so that living together is assumed to result in a division of labor. It also results in the more frequent pregnancy, which is thought to entrench the dependence of the woman on the man. The man, though quite insensible to love in the state of nature and utterly ignorant of his connection to children, is thought to become attached to both women and children through constant association. Which, I don't agree with this. I don't think that human beings have ever existed at a time when they were so naive as to not know that fucking didn't beget children. That's just my opinion, bro. This mythic time, like time before its time, pre-social time. I just don't buy it. That's just my opinion, though. Okay. Anyway, but we do know that, like, fuck all the pre-social shit. We know that there's sexual dimorphism in the human species. We know this. We do know that women are weaker than men. We do know that men, for the most part, will risk their lives and limbs to protect their families, their women and their children. They will go off to war. They will sacrifice themselves and form a front line of defense for their children and women, especially if the women actually show some respect and loyalty to the man. There's not too much the man won't do. Okay? But anyway, this response is similar to that of the woman in the state of nature who is thought to care for her offspring because she grows fond of them through habit. But there is a crucial philosophic difference, which is a good example of the way in which thought may be shaped by unconscious male bias. This is a feminist now. The woman's attachment to her dependent offspring is natural in the fullest sense of the word. It can be said to be merely instinctive, since it is presumed to occur when human beings live exactly like animals. Paternal affection, however, is a significant development, the result of socialization, and based on a rather abstract knowledge. The mother, of course, has immediate awareness of the child's relation to herself since it emerges from her own body. Duh! The father, on the other hand, must make quite a distant correlation between his relations with the mother and the appearance much later of a child. Even if we suppose compassion and feelings for helpless children to be natural in humans of both sexes, so that a man might easily become emotionally attached to the child that has mysteriously appeared from the woman he is attached to, it is a mighty leap to the conclusion that he had anything to do with its appearance. Rousseau would be the first to agree with this. Of the natural man, he writes, in other words, you don't know that bang, bang, all you want to do is zoom, 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 and a boom, boom, that actually gives rise to children. That, pre-time, before time, men just thought women were these magical creatures. And, like the way, I don't know, a scab spontaneously, no, that's the wrong analogy, but like a flower seemingly spontaneously emerges out of the ground, that's how a child, spontaneously emerges out of the womb of a woman. Anyway, this is what Rousseau says. His soul, agitated by nothing, is given over to the sole sentiment of its present existence without any idea of the future, however near it may be. And his projects, as limited as his views, barely extend to the end of the day. The more one mediates on this subject, the more the distance from pure sensations to the simplest knowledge increases in our eyes. I think I said the one more mediates, but the more one meditates on this subject, the more distance from pure sensations to the simplest knowledge increases in our eyes. So anyway, paternity, therefore, is a product of human artifice based on knowledge and custom, and therefore, according to this philosophy, specifically human in a way that maternal love is not thought to be. Because of this, paternity will not be treated as a disqualification for the highest forms of human artifice, namely political life and rational discourse. Allegedly, natural maternity, on the other hand, is typically treated as such by political theorists, including Rousseau. So in other words, that's a lot going on there, bro. There's a lot going on here, man. In other words, paternity is artificial because men really don't know or have like any foresight in the state of nature. They don't know that having sex produces kids. So women are going to have more natural connection to children than are men. And men come to learn to understand and to accept responsibility and the emotions that go along with paternity out of civilization. Whereas women have a connection to children that's visceral and natural. I think that's the part being, articulated here. Anyway, she goes on to say, this difference has important implications for the structure of Rousseau's political philosophy. For the moment, however, we will be confined to discussion of this issue from within the terms of Rousseau's theory. The sexual division of labor, which appears as a result of the association of the sexes, is not simply the result of practical cooperation for Rousseau, but a reflection of the essential difference between the sexes. As we have seen, the woman is so constituted, according to Rousseau, that passivity and timidity are assets to her proper purpose. Once social relations have developed, this purpose is to reproduce within a family whose unity depends entirely on her behavior. Natural passivity and timidity in sexual relations, according to Rousseau, form the natural base for modesty, which is the specifically feminine virtue in civil society. And look, we know that I've said this before, I'll say it again. This is the last time I'll say it tonight. If women do not submit to having a man present in the context of a family life, and men do basically have removed the man's right to be there, then she, in essence, is in control of the family. She, by default. This is saying pretty much the same thing. The unity depends entirely on her behavior. If she does not submit to it, There is no family outside of the context of her and the children. So in effect, she becomes the ruler of the family, and in turn, in effect, she becomes the ruler of civil society. Those are the facts. You might not like it. Those are the facts, Jack. Those are the facts, Jack. This is why, like Rousseau is placing such importance on this. Like, I mean, you can say, okay, well, let's go back and see what he has to say about the state of nature. I mean, he's a person trying to do anthropology before there was a discipline called anthropology. Okay? Anyway, modesty is the attribute that may ensure biological paternity of the children to the man she lives with. Peep game now. Listen to the game being spewed by my man Rousseau. Look here, bro. And this is a feminist putting the words out there, but look. Modesty is really, don't be out here all up in these streets on the cock carousel. Because if the woman is not modest, if she's a slut, if she's a hoe, if she's a freak, if she out here, how we know them kids Will Smith kids? How we know them ain't August Alsina's kids? But we know them, we know probably, I mean, they look like Will, but men have been wrong about this before, though, I'm just saying. But you want your woman to be modest, right? You want your woman to be modest to ensure the biological paternity of the kids. Because, I mean, look, let's just face it, man. Whether it's a male or a female, a lot of energy and effort is invested, a lot of time, resources are invested into the establishment of familial life. For better or for worse, whatever the case may be. But God damn it, if I'm going to invest all my effort and energy in this motherfucker, at least I want the goddamn kids to be my motherfucking kids. Period. I don't want to have to worry about whether or not you fucking the mailman, fucking the milkman and all of this, the pool boy. I want to take care of my kids. Anyway, modesty is the attribute that may ensure biological paternity of the children to the man she lives with. And the necessity Rousseau sees for this dictates the retiring and wholly domestic life of good women. She serves as the link between them and their father. She alone makes him love them and gives him the confidence to call them his own. This is the truth, man. Like, whether you like it or not, man, a woman is the link between a child and their father. She can determine whether or not those kids love you and whether you will actually be able to love them. These are the facts. And the woman gives you the confidence for you to call those kids your own, bro. Those are actual factuals. Oh, man. On account of the artificiality and the apparent fragility of the bond of the father to his children, the woman is required to live a life dictated by the necessity to appear respectable. That is, to convince her husband and everyone else that she is sexually monogamous. Nothing less than this degree of certitude, bolstered by public opinion, is thought to be sufficient to induce him to remain attached to that particular family and to provide for his support. Damn right! Look here, bruh. Let me just say this shit. And let me keep this shit 100% real right now. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but how many bitches out there, man, taking care of other motherfucking men's kids and shit? Or other women's kids? How many, motherfucker? I ain't talking about, women who can't have children and so they adopt or some shit like that. I mean, like, how many women are actually like willing to be like, I'm gonna take care of your kid like my kid. We gonna take care of these kids together. Like, how many? How many women are just taking on kids, just like taking in just kids that ain't even theirs and shit? How many women are gonna treat your kids like they would treat their own kids? There's a reason why they got a concept called the wicked stepmother now. Come on now. I'm just saying. By the very law of nature, women are at the mercy of men's judgments, as much for their own sake as for that of their children. It is not enough that they be estimable. They must be esteemed. It is not enough for them to be pretty. They must please. It is not enough for them to be temperate. They must be recognized as such. Their honor is not only in their conduct, but in their reputation. And it is not possible that a woman who consents to be regarded as disreputable can ever be decent. Now, this is Rousseau now. Now, of course, this woman is going to reject all of this, of course, because she's a feminist. They believe that, like, being in familial conjugal relationships is, not to the woman's advantage. But, of course, most of all of this is only playing out in what Rousseau would call amor propre related to possessive market-based cultures, in which the only interest is interest le particulier. My interest, not that what's best for the whole, what's best for me, related to a whole bunch of commercial market-based forces that in and of themselves are artificial and really unimportant. The artificial, they are the matrix. All the nuances and the intricacies and the various complexities in which men create in order to tabulate, well, who's better than the next person and who's better looking and who's got the best, who's the best dressed, who's the most popular, who's the funniest and all this fuck shit. A million contrivances to appease men's vanity, which have been, created related to this artificial thing we call culture and society. But nowadays, shit, you got women like, hey, I'm a slut. They doing slut walks. Who wants to be married to a woman who's basically like, I'm a slut? Who? That's what made 21 Savage look real bad out there. He walking around with Amber Rose. She talking about I'm a slut. You walking right next to her like I'm a slut too. Like, really, bro? That's not a good look, bro. That is not a good look, bro. Women don't want that shit either. That's the funny thing, man. Because they will kill your ass. They will go fucking spastic if they see you fucking with another chick. Will they not? I mean, I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna shed no tears. Oh, these years I sacrificed. Come on, man. They got hot grits. They gonna take it, burn the car down, all this shit. I bust the windows out your car. I ain't mean to take it that far, a whole nine. But if men even begin to desire, like, okay, I don't want my wife to be a fucking whore. I want my kids to be mine. That's patriarchy there. Man, fuck that bullshit. Now you got women out in the public right now like, well, my husband really doesn't dick me down well in the bed, so that's why I fuck with my son's best friend. I fucked him and I felt alive again. That's your wife, man? That's where we are now. That's where we are now? Come on, man. Anyway, the wholly incompatible bases of masculine and feminine virtue are summed up in the following sentence from Emile. Opinion is the grave of virtue among men and its throne among women. Rousseau does not, however, leave himself completely exposed to empirical refutation concerning the nature of women. In the letter to Michel d'Alembert sur les spectacles, he writes, even if it could be denied that a special sentiment of chasteness was natural to women, would it be any less true that in society their lot ought to be a domestic and retired life, and that they ought to be raised in principles appropriate to it? If the timidity, chasteness, and modesty which are proper to them are social inventions, it is in society's interest that women acquire these qualities. Thus, although Rousseau does not argue that the male-headed biological family is natural and unaffected by history, he does argue that it is nevertheless a social institution that may be grounded on nature by reason. He writes, when a woman complains on this score about an unjust man-made inequality, she is wrong. This inequality is not a human institution, or at least it is the work not of prejudice, but of reason. It is of philosophic significance that virtuous women in civil society are characterized as closer to nature than virtuous men. The latter must be transformed and denatured. According to Rousseau, the modest woman appears still as little more than uncorrupted. As such, she will form a necessary link between the supreme artifice of the good society on the one hand and nature on the other. So this is a feminist speaking at this point. But, my only argument is this. If men are not compelled to take care of children, who's going to take care of them? Now, they've created the conditions nowadays where women can take care of themselves, right? and their children, which really today I would assert the rules have changed so much so that like men no longer have connections to their children. And this is wrong for a bunch of different reasons. It's not wise for a large amount of reasons, which I won't go into right now tonight. I've been doing this for like down there 2 hours and 20 minutes. I'm gonna finish this up tomorrow, okay? But hey, I'm telling you what Rousseau thinks and how feminists respond to it. It's interesting to me. If you find it interesting, put a 1 in the chat and I'll resume doing this tomorrow. I had fun doing it. But I mean, my whole thing about this is, see, right now the state is able to serve as a proxy by means to make a man support a woman and children. But that's the only thing upholding the system. If a man decided, like a woman can decide, like if a man can say, I don't want to take care of these fucking kids, all of this shit would be done. It'd be over with. Women wouldn't be out here fucking having these kids like this. Because who would pay for it? Who would pay for it? They have to make you pay for this shit. You literally have to be drug in to pay. But guess what you don't get? You don't get any control over the life and the activities of the kids. You are a fucking uncle daddy. You are a non-factor, bitch. Like the one chick that was dating Chad Ochocinco a long time ago. You are a non-factor. This culture has moved away from like extreme paternity to now, hey, she can do whatever she wants. She can be all up in these streets, dude. And you still gonna take care of the motherfucking kids, nigga. And you gonna do what she say, nigga. Hey, look, BGS know what, hey, look. The tender years doctrine gave the children to the state. Basically, either that or the Custody of Infants Act. These men gave up patriarchy a long time ago. They gave that shit up. And I can guarantee you, these women don't give a fuck about equality, none of that shit. They got the feet, if they got their knees on your neck, and they gonna keep pressing. Period. We all uncle daddies. Bottom line. I mean, and even if you're not an uncle daddy, you can be made into an uncle daddy at her desire, her whim. All she got to do is say, I'm done with you. I want to fuck somebody else. All the connections between you and your children are torn, uprooted, deracinated, all dependent and contingent upon her own opinion and her feelings. At any given moment to the next, with no social shame or sanction, with no thought about how it impacts or affects your life at all. And the family court system is part of this fuckery. And it's the very same group of people who claim that they live in a nation under God, indivisible, with truth and justice for all. So, it is what it is, man. I just wanted to spit, whatever I had to spit for the night, man. I'm about to go ahead and take it in. If you like the content, please support the channel intermittently from time to time. Thank you, Ray Knows. Appreciate your contribution. I know Rashid gave me a little contribution earlier. I do this because I want you to have the information. I know this is not exciting as me just yelling and screaming and, going off on a particular person in popular culture at a particular point in time. It's required for you to actually do some abstract thinking. But I feel like it's profitable. I think it's necessary. I think it's something that you'll profit from in the long run. I know, it got to shake the cobwebs out, to comprehend some of this shit. But it ain't that difficult, man. I'm here to walk you through it. So, But I'll read the next. I'll read the next section, man. It's only, I think this paper is like 33 pages long. I'm not going to read all of it tomorrow, but I'll read, it's some interesting shit coming up. Foreshadowing. According to Rousseau, the social equality of the sexes poses a serious danger to civic virtue. His view of this danger is based upon the critical analysis of modern civil society, briefly described near the beginning of this paper, especially the concept of amor propre. To begin with, here's an image Rousseau paints of the ambitious individualistic woman in a developing mobile bourgeois society. Now check it out now. And this is just foreshadowing. A brilliant wife is a plague to her husband, her children, her valets, everyone. From the sublime elevation of her fair genius, she disdains all her women's duties and always begins by making herself into a man after the fashion of Mademoiselle de l'Enclos. Outside her home, she is always ridiculous and very justly criticized. This is the inevitable result as soon as one leaves one's station and is not fit for the station one wants to adopt. All these women of great talent never impress anyone but fools. It is always known who the artist or the friend is who holds the pen or the brush when they work. It is known who the discreet man of letters is who secretly dictates their oracles to them. Now, this might be going a little overboard, right? But anyway, this image is contemptuous. It signifies Rousseau's belief that if women attempt to act in society according to the norms of amor propre, engaging in constant competition to further their particular interests, they will inevitably be bested by the men. It does not signify his admiration for the success of the male within that mode of social interaction. For example, in another of the passages, which shows his awareness of familiar feminist arguments, he writes, "Women do not cease to proclaim that we raise them to be vain and coquettish, that we constantly entertain them with childish things in order to remain more easily their masters. They have no colleges. What a great misfortune. Would God there were none for boys. They would be more sensibly and decently raised." And this is just foreshadowing and I'm about to be done. However, the basic inequality of Rousseau's approach appears in his belief that the woman who enters public life on the terms of amor propre does even more violence to her nature than the man caught up in that mode of interaction. In the letter to Michel d'Alembert, Rousseau argues at great length that one of the major reasons that there ought not be a theater established at Geneva is that this will result in women going out in public in company with men. Because of the very nature of sexual relations, According to Rousseau, the presence of women in public life undermines masculine excellence and exacerbates amor propre. The frequent attendance of men and women at public entertainments will focus attention on the natural impulses of the sexes to be pleasing to one another. While this is an expansion of the domain of women, since love is their empire, it diminishes men. This occurs because the standards of behavior appropriate to love and courtship, inevitably feminine standards for reasons previously described. Hold on, maybe I skipped, hold on, did I skip that? No, I didn't. This occurs because the standards of behavior appropriate to love and courtship are inevitably feminine standards. According to Rousseau, men who lead a life of constant association with women will become enervated and weak. Men who lead a life of constant association with women will become enervated and weak. Such men will be far more prone to turn their learning or talent to the pleasing performance arising from amor propre, rather than to the rigorous or morally challenging pursuit of truth, since they will inevitably compete with one another for feminine approbation. By themselves, he writes, the men, exempted from having to lower their ideas to the range of women and to clothe reason and gallantry, can devote themselves to grave and serious discourse without fear of ridicule. A presumed seductive power of women to impose their standards on account of the nature of sexual relations, as Rousseau sees them, enables women to dominate even in areas which are thought to be ultimately beyond their competence. And that's foreshadowing. He's basically saying, look, you got all these damn women around, they're going to manipulate the shit out of men, and men aren't going to be able to focus on rigorous subject matter. They're going to be trying to compete and show off for women. But that's foreshadowing the third section. So I'm about this thing, man. This is one of the reasons why women do not want men to have male-only schools. I guarantee they can say what they want to say about equality and all of this shit. They want to be able to have influence over your behavior. They want to be able to temper your sentiments, to govern and circumscribe your actions and reactions. But anyway, man, I'm out of here, man. I'll be back tomorrow at the regular time. I said I was going to be at the regular time today, and I wasn't. But, fuck it. Better late than never, right? Hey, man, BGS, man, tell them to support the scholar, man. Like, I'm giving these guys game. I'm trying to give them game, bro. Trying to give them this game, bro. But anyway, man, I'll be back at y'all tomorrow, man. I'll holler at you later, man. Peace.